feel like Gordon Bombay would have taken his career to even further heights.
Everything's flashy, everything's cocaine, everything's
Fun.
Open wide for some soccer!
I don't care what your personal thoughts are at home. I care that you hate the
Call
Cowboys.
this college rule!
Welcome back, everybody, to the Sports Experience Podcast. Dom and Chris here, and before every show, like we said, a couple comics, just talking sports. Make sure you like, subscribe, and share, and also comment on our videos. Doesn't even have to be positive. Also, if you have suggestions, because that's very important, because this is a suggestion in our block of episodes from a subscriber. Like we said before, we're doing a block on some of the best NFL playoff games of all time. And we've got almost a forgotten classic today, Chris.
Got the 83 NFC Championship game, and it's an interesting one. I'll say that.
I mean, when you're talking about two of the 80s best teams, it's these two and two legendary coaches, legendary players all over the guys we've done episodes on. Actually playing
Hall of Famers all over it, and it's
pretty amazing.
It was a good game.
So it's between the Washington Redskins and the San Francisco 49ers. The 83 Redskins are one of the greatest teams, regular season teams ever in NFL history. I think you'd be hard-pressed.
They went 15-1 that year or something, 14-1?
It was 14-2.
14-2.
And their only two losses were by 1 point. Opening day on Monday Night Football against the Cowboys and another Monday Night Football game against the Packers, which was just like one of the greatest shootouts in Monday Night Football history. They were the highest scoring team at the time in NFL history, led by legendary head coach Joe Gibbs. They're defending Super Bowl champions. Joe Theismann, the quarterback, that was his MVP season. We did an episode on that. Over 3,700 yards passing and 29 touchdowns. John Riggins set an NFL record for rushing touchdowns in a season this year.
And he gets the majority of their touchdowns in this game.
Yes.
So it makes sense.
I mean, he had almost 1,400 yards rushing that year, 25 touchdowns on the ground. And their backup, scat back, Joe Washington, had 772 on the ground and 454 yards receiving with 6 touchdowns.
That's what they're just putting points on the board all year.
I did want to bring up, they employed, so Washington would come in as a backup because they ran a tight end and H-back or double tight formation. I don't know if you read anything about this, but Joe Gibbs invented this offense and this offensive scheme for one reason, and that was to basically stop up an in his prime coked up Lawrence Taylor.
Oh, yes.
You'd have that extra guy to chip him. And double team. So they had Don Warren, Rick Walker, and Clint Didier with 8 touchdowns combined from that position, which is ridiculous.
Pretty solid for your literally like what you would call like a rotation back. You know what I mean? Like you're just like, oh, that's a great number for a guy on a bad team.
Oh, 100%. And then the wide receivers, I miss nicknames, Chris.
I
fun
know.
Bunch. Marky Mark was not a part of this fun bunch, but they had downtown Charlie Brown, over 1,200 yards receiving and 8 tutties. Art Monk, who's in the Hall of Fame, 746 yards and 5 touchdowns. And Alvin Garrett with 332 yards. I mean, they were just a machine. And Gibbs, prior to coming to Washington, he was part of that Air Coryell group in San Diego. So you're just finding all of these awesome players.
Yep. Well, that's the other thing is they're not just a good pass team. They're not just a good running team. It's like they could beat you on any play, and they had a really great defense.
They had a great offensive line.
The offensive line,
the
too.
Hogs.
Yeah.
I mean,
well, like you were saying, they're returning Super Bowl champions. They're probably one of the best regular season teams this year, and then they get up against these 49ers that are kind of ascending.
Yeah, the 49ers are ascending. I did want to say one thing about Washington's defense, though. While they were 11th in points against, a lot of which was allowing garbage time points, they were first in turnovers created and had just a stacked pass rush with Dexter Manley, who we should do an episode on because if you think LT was nuts, this dude was nuts.
If you think LT was manly, you don't know anything about Dexter Manley.
Thinking about stealing Dexter Manley's Porsche over there. But you're right. The 49ers are ascending. Like they had that. They won in 81.
Yep.
So they're 2 years removed from a Super Bowl title. But 82 was kind of a transition year with injuries, and also the strike-shortened season kind of killed them.
And they really did not have a good 82 season. And a lot of people thought that they were kind of dropping off like you see some teams do after they win a Super Bowl. Maybe some guys aren't getting paid. They go somewhere else, whatever. But like this season 83, you're like, oh, these guys are amazing.
They're locked and loaded. So Joe Montana makes the Pro Bowl.
I thought it was Montana.
Joe Montana. Best tackler I've seen since Joe Montana. I love how they're like the cheerleaders and the mascot are drinking Jack Daniels and you have the Doors in the background.
I love that.
Oh my God. I was not born a very handsome man. Bless you, Clint Howard. Montana, he had a 64.5 completion percentage, which, granted, it is the West Coast offense, but at that time is unfucking believable.
Yes.
3,910 yards passing and 26 touchdowns. Wendell Tyler is their main running back, 856 yards on the ground and 4 tutties. But rookie fullback Roger Craig, who we did an episode on, has really made his presence known as not only the blocking back, he had 48 catches in his rookie year. 4 times as many as when he was at Nebraska his whole career.
So they really utilize, and that's the thing about this. I feel like the San Francisco offense was 82. They really didn't have it figured out, injuries, all that kind of stuff. 83, you look at it and you're like, God, this team is really clicking on everything.
It's like sometimes you just have a bad day.
Yeah.
Sometimes you just have a bad year. Wide receivers, you had Dwight Clark and Freddie Solomon, who combined for over 101 catches and over 1,500 yards and 12 touchdowns. Clark is injured, though, for this game.
Yep.
And they picked up Pro Bowl tight end Russ Francis from the Patriots, who had also 4 touchdown receptions. A good mix of old and young along the offensive line. They were 4th in points per game. So it's not like this is necessarily a clash of styles like we've seen in other games. It's like these are 2 really good offenses led by 2 really good offensive-minded coaches.
And 2 Hall of Fame quarterbacks.
Yes.
So it's really, like you said, it's not a clash of styles. It's like, we're going to score. Are you going to score? We're going to, you know what I mean? It turns out to be a really good game, but almost lopsided.
Neither of the defenses are bad either, is because when you think of the Redskins of the 80s and you think of the Niners of the 80s, you think of offense, which you should.
Yes.
But their defenses are really good, particularly San Francisco's. They were 4th in points per game. George Seifert, later their head coach, is their defensive coordinator. Dwayne Board had 13 sacks. Freddie Dean made the Pro Bowl, who's in the Hall of Fame, 17 and a half.
That's so wild.
Keena Turner is the stout guy up the middle for them in the linebacker core. And you could argue, as good as Board and Dean were up front, their secondary is the strongest part of this defense. Because you have Ronnie Lott, future Hall of Famer, making the Pro Bowl. 4 picks. Eric Wright had 7 picks and 2 touchdowns. Dwight Hicks made the Pro Bowl and had 2 interceptions returned for touchdowns. And Carlton Williamson had 4 picks. Like, don't make mistakes against either of these defenses or you are going to essentially fuck yourself.
And there's not a weak link in the secondary. You know, and like some teams are like, we're going to rookie corner, whatever it is. But literally it was like, no. If we make a mistake anywhere on the field, it'll probably be intercepted.
For sure. So leading into this game, Washington played in the divisional round against the Rams. They had won 9 straight to end the regular season. And this is Eric Dickerson's rookie year, and you're thinking, oh, man, the Rams might have a chance. They beat them 51-7. It was an ass-kicking.
And to the opposite, where San Francisco barely squeak it out against the Lions.
Yeah.
So, like, it's really interesting coming into this game where you're like, oh, Redskins have this in the bag, or not in the bag, but they were definitely the favored team.
I mean, they were the favored team all year in the NFL, the way they dominated people. And if Eddie Murray, not baseball Eddie Murray, doesn't miss that kick, the Lions are playing.
Are through.
Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, they're playing Washington.
Yep.
So it is January 8th, 1984 at RFK Stadium. It's good weather for football in Washington at that time of year. I read 34 degrees, and you didn't really see any inclement weather. Granted, the RFK turf, garbage.
Yes.
Absolute. It's just painted over dirt if you watch this game. And want to get into it?
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah,
So Washington gets the ball first. And one of the themes I think throughout this first half you'll notice is they could have won this game by the end of the first half. Like they could have
Redskins.
Yes, they could have wrapped this up with a bow, and it's just I won't even say shooting themselves in the foot, but there's one guy who really almost screws them over, and we'll get into it later. So they start the game on their own 22. There's a 13-yard pass to downtown Charlie Brown. 2 runs to Riggins of plus and minus 1 set him up with a 3rd and 10. And after an incompletion to Nick Giaquinto, they have to punt the ball to the Niners. And the problem with the Niners throughout this first half is they cannot get anything going defensively. Richie Pettibone, the defensive coordinator for Washington, really makes Montana look bad throughout this first half.
Well, I was going to say, the Redskins really, they're not excelling at the rate that they should be, but they're really controlling the clock and just taking the ball back. Like, it's kind of an interesting, when you look at this first quarter especially, you're like, how are the Redskins not up 14-0?
Yeah.
You know,
it's just what, for whatever reason, shit happens.
Yep.
San Francisco ends up punting on their first possession, and Washington kind of starts to get the ball going. Riggins gets a 3-yard run. Monk gets him the first, their second first down with a 12-yard catch. And then on 3rd and 1, Riggins picks it up with about 8 minutes to go in the first quarter at the San Francisco 45, or at the Washington 47. And then Didier has a first down on a big 8-yard catch, and it's first down. And they give the ball to Joe Washington, not Washington, but they give the ball to Joe Washington, and he's inside the 20, and he fumbles it away. The Niners get it at their own 17, and you're thinking, man, we could have used those points.
Yes.
We really could have used those points, but it was a really good play by the San Francisco defender there.
But especially just like setting up the tone for the rest of the game, being like, we're up 7-0, our defense is stopping them, but that's the way it goes with these fumbles sometimes.
San Francisco experiences some pretty crappy luck on their next position because throughout the game, their punter, Tom Oros, can't get anything on the ball.
Yes.
Just very bad, but it's a very bad punting day. And Washington ends up getting the ball back at midfield after stopping them. Washington can't do anything with the ball, but they're able to punt. And while it's not a great punt, it rolls to the San Francisco 8-yard line. And you're going to let the defense go to work. San Francisco's got a long field. You're thinking, okay, everything is working. With 5:14 left in the first quarter, on a 3rd and 4 for San Francisco, at basically inside their own 20, Freddie Solomon drops a pass, which not only would have moved the sticks, but really might have flipped field position as far as this drive is concerned. The Redskins start at the Niners 48 after a bad punt. Riggins runs for 4, then again for 3, and with 3:30 left in the first quarter, there's an incomplete pass to Charlie Brown, and they're forced to punt again. It's a 39-yard punt. Monty Coleman saves it at the 1, which is a
huge play.
Even though they're not scoring points, I like that you brought up they're controlling the game.
Yes.
San Francisco's basically just in quicksand at this point.
Well, I watched a bunch of highlights from this game, and then one of the highlights that popped up was like, all of the horrible punts. And I was like, oh, okay. So I clicked on that and I was like, Jesus, these are like not even like college bad. These are like high school bad where you're like, God, why are we letting Freddie back there punting the ball? This is bad.
Freddie doesn't even have a foot.
God.
That's just off the shin.
It's off the shin.
I bet you Ray Guy was probably like drinking a beer because he's the first punter in the hall, and he's playing it this time for the Raiders. He's probably just like, you call that a punt?
Yes. No, seriously though, because it really screwed them over in this first quarter with their just horrible field position.
So 3rd and 5 after starting at their own 1. Francis has a catch to the 19 or gets 19 yards to get him the first down. The first quarter ends up finishing. Unfortunately, there's a holding penalty which forces San Francisco to punt and play behind the sticks. Now
it's 0-0 at this point.
Which
that's what.
If you asked any pundit what the score would be, if it would be 0-0 in the first quarter, they'd have laughed at you.
Yes,
they'd be like, "Oh, did like Theismann get injured?"
Yeah, no, seriously though, and they probably would have laughed if you said it was like 14-0, and you're like, one team didn't score.
Yeah.
But having both teams not score, you could tell it was almost like two boxers like figuring each other out, where like Washington was actually in control and should have scored, but like you could just tell San Francisco couldn't get anything going.
Like nothing clicked for them offensively. And credit to Washington's defense because
Yes.
that's a very tall order. So we get to this punt, and this is one of the mistakes that is made, like one of the biggest mistakes of the game. Nick Giaquinto catches the punt, and on the field is rookie cornerback and future Hall of Famer Darrell Green. And Darrell Green had a hell of a game in this game. They called basically a gadget on a punt, which you never see in postseason play. I mean, this is like even cooler than the Tony Nathan thing.
Yeah.
Giaquinto catches it, throws the ball across the field to Green, and he scores.
Yeah.
He ran all the way down the field and scored, but it's a penalty flag.
Got to call it back.
Because Frank Wycheck wasn't throwing it to not Randy Moss. It was Nick Giaquinto to Darrell Green, and it was a forward lateral.
Yes.
So despite the penalty, because San Francisco's backed up, Washington starts at their own 45 with 13:11 to go in the second quarter. Riggins has a huge run down to the Niners 33.
I was just going to say, Riggins really, for this drive, when you look at it, you're like, okay, they need to just start going to him because it is not they're not scoring on any drive, and now they're just kind of keeping it on the ground and like, all right, we're just going to shove it in.
I'm going to be honest. Because of this game, I started watching a lot of John Riggins. I have one comparison to him and only one, and a lot of younger people who probably don't know who John Riggins is, go and watch some of his film, and you probably agree with me. He's the Derrick Henry of the 80s.
Yeah.
He was a sprint champion at like in high school in Kansas,
Yeah.
like 100-meter dash, 200-meter dash. Like he has that, and he had that Henry size where he's tall and he's hard to bring down. Literally the only way you can stop him is like with Derrick Henry is you have to clog the middle and make him move laterally, because if he gets any head of steam, I mean, granted his nickname was the Diesel, but like you watch him, they're such similar fucking players.
Yep.
So younger
That's
viewers,
that's
watch
pretty good.
John Riggins and you'll be like, this white guy's badass.
Yeah, I like that. That's good because he really is one of those guys that once he gets going, he's running downhill.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I mean, he had the winning touchdown or the go-ahead touchdown winner in the previous Super Bowl on a 4th and 1 where he bounced it outside and just no one caught him.
Yep.
So he gets at the Niners 33, he runs for 3, then he runs for 2, and on 3rd and 5, Theismann throws an incomplete pass. Now we get to send in 1982 NFL MVP. That is not a lie. You can look it up. They gave it to a fucking kicker. A straight-on kicker with all those socks.
I know.
Oh, my God.
So weird.
They got that barefoot kicker. I think we've all seen enough of that. So they send in Mark Moseley for 45 yards out, and you're thinking, all right, we'll get 3 out of this drive. Would have been nice if they let Green score. Total miss. Misses wide right and misses bad.
By a
to
lot,
the wide,
yeah.
Bad to the right. 11:02 in the second quarter. It's still a scoreless game. And I think if you're Bill Walsh, you're just like, something good fucking happened. We're still in this game.
Yeah.
So they start at their own 28. There's a no gain to Craig, Wilson for 5, and then an incompletion. They have to punt. I think they've only had 2 first downs to this point.
I was just gonna say their offense is just looking like they don't know what they should do. A lot of drop passes, a lot of miss passes, a lot of just like, and like you were saying, credit to the Redskins because they literally were like holding them back and just constantly had great field position that they didn't capitalize on.
I like that you brought that up because not a lot of people bring that up in relation to like football games anymore. Is like people will bring up time of possession, obviously. Field position's huge.
Oh, it's so big, especially when you get the ball and you're like, okay, we only have to drive 50 yards.
Yeah.
As opposed to, we have to drive 96 yards.
Yeah.
You know?
So 9:18 in the second quarter, Washington gets the ball back, and there's a huge pass on this play to Didier down to the Niners 18. They run Riggins for 5, then they run him for 1, and then on 3rd and 4, Joe Washington gets him 5 yards, which is huge. Just a nice pass from Theismann to him to really set him up to where it's like, it's Riggins time now.
Yep.
Like, and 4-yard touchdown run with 6:16 left to go in the second quarter, and they're up 7-0.
And this is how I feel like the second quarter, they're like, we're giving the ball to Riggins, and if they can stop them, they can stop them. Because it felt like it was almost like 50% of the plays were straight up for him.
And you got to give credit to San Francisco's secondary because Fun Bunch were a pretty good, damn good group of wide receivers.
Yep.
So the Niners start at their own 23, and then on 3rd and 10, they have another incomplete pass. So they go 3 and out again. Washington has nice field position again after a crappy punt at their own 36. Big run to Riggins. Gets him 44 yards. So he gets 44 yards on this awesome run, and then they lose 4. Washington has a 9-yard pass. Oh, wait, no. He gets to the 44. Excuse me. He has a big run later in the game. So he gets 8. Then they lose 4 with Riggins, and then they have a 9-yard pass, which sets up 4th down, and they have to punt. But this is another huge play in this game. They call the fake punt.
Yep.
That's the second punt gadget
I know.
in a quarter of football. I don't know if that's ever been done before.
In the NFC Championship. Sometimes you'll see stuff like that in regular season, but you're like, man, Redskins are like really not being disrespectful, but they're like, we're winning this game, and we're going to pull out all the tricks.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, they're a tricky bunch.
They're a tricky
They're a
bunch.
fun bunch. They're a tricky bunch. I mean, they like to go to that place with the stupid shit on the walls and the cheese sticks. So, Jeff, and I always like when punters run it because you can tell which punters were athletes as opposed to punters.
Yes.
This man obviously played other sports or played other positions before he became a full-time punter.
Yes.
So he ends up running it and gets down to the Niners 25. Theismann scrambles for 5 yards, and we hit the 2-minute warning in the first half. Washington has a 2-yard run. There's an incomplete pass. And then it's 4th down again, and they bring out Mark Moseley. And at this point, he's not really considering joining the police force under the name of an assumed missing hiker, but he's starting to think about it.
I was just going to say, because it is, it should be 13-0 at the end of this.
At worst,
Yeah.
13-0.
You know what I mean? And Moseley just was not on it today. I forget the 49er punter. It's interesting.
Tom Oros, yeah.
It's interesting to watch just the bad kicking and how it affects the game.
I've always been a part of that school of thought where your special teams doesn't need to be elite to make you a good football team. They just need to be league average. Because if you're league average, they're not screwing you over.
And consistent. So you're not like, God, I wonder what it's going to be like this time. It's like, no. He's going to hit a 35-yarder. We're not worried about it.
You're not Kurt Schilling in the dugout with a towel on your face thinking all sorts of Kurt Schilling thoughts. He missed it to the right, Chris.
Oh, my God.
Yeah, but he did miss this next kick to the right with 1:11 to go in the second quarter. And at this point, San Francisco's offense kind of shows their first signs of life. Tyler runs for 7. There's a pass for Wilson for 4 for their first down with 46 seconds left. And then there's a big pass to Solomon, which gets them to the Washington 45. With 35 seconds to go, Ronaldo Nehemiah has a 6-yard catch. And then Craig has another reception down to the Washington 38. Sets up one last play for a Ray Wersching field goal. And from 55 yards, he's not even close. Like, as far as distance.
Yeah.
Like, you know that you're really going to need to get this dude closer if you're going to have to, get it. And then Washington, or I shouldn't say Washington, Theismann throws an interception for Washington to end the half.
To end the half, yeah.
And I would figure if you're going into the locker room, if you're San Francisco, you're like, we probably played an F- first half on the offensive side of the ball, and we're still in it.
Yeah, it's 7-0. And like you said, they were like, I don't know if we could have played worse than we played that first half. And like, this game should be within reach. And if they just can kind of clean up some of the mistakes, then it's really their game to win, I feel like. Like, you know how momentum shifts where they're like,
Yeah.
Washington's definitely playing better. But when you go into half, you're just like, guys, we're 1 touchdown away. Yeah,
like one big play away.
One big play, yeah.
Like from taking the crowd out of it, from making Washington go like, oh my God, we're screwed.
Yep.
It rightfully could have been 28-0 entering halftime.
Yes.
But it's not. And we start the second half, and it's more of the same for the 49ers.
Yeah.
But they carry a little momentum in from halftime, and they start really driving with a hurry-up offense. You have a pass to Russ Francis for 12 yards, Solomon for 5. And then on 3rd and 5, Tyler makes a catch to get the first down. He fumbles it, They get it back at the Washington 38, but they're really screwed over on a pass interference by Roger Craig on this drive, which eventually they're in field goal range, but Wersching ends up missing a field goal. So we're still at 7-0, and the Skins, they start on their own 33, pass to Brown for 9, Riggins for 2, and then Walker gets him down on a reception to the San Francisco 45. Riggins, this sets up an awesome play. I don't know if you saw this in the highlights that you watched. Theismann tosses it to Riggins, who throws a pass to Brown inside the 10.
Yes.
I mean, they've pulled out every stops. There's no stops left. I mean, there's no stops left, like Henry Ruggs in his car. He should have gone to jail for the rest of his life. I don't care.
I mean,
anyway, Riggins runs for 3. There's a false start, which backs him up to the 11. And then with 8:41 in the third quarter, a big sack by Dean sends Theismann down to the 25. Washington catches it for 4 to try and get some of the yardage back, but no, it's first and goal. You don't score, it's 4th down.
Yep.
So they send out Mark Moseley again for a field goal. Good to see someone who doesn't buckle under the pressure. And what does he do, Chris?
Oh, he nails a person in the stands.
That popcorn guy's life will never be the same.
I wanted to look this up. I couldn't find a fact on this, but I was wondering if he had ever missed 3 consecutive field goals ever again in his career. And I couldn't find the stats on that.
He really didn't play. Like, he had, like, spot duty. Like, you remember the Marathon by the Lake game, he was their kicker. Matt Barr was hurt that year. They were just like, we need a guy.
Yeah.
But this is kind of the game where the shine goes away.
Yes. And then you look back at the MVP and you're like, we gave it to a kicker?
The 80s were a weird time, Chris. I mean,
80s.
It was snowing when it wasn't really cold out.
God, the 80s.
So it was 7:28 in the third quarter. It's still 7-0 between these two offensive juggernauts. San Francisco really screws themselves on this next possession. They're at their own 20. There's a 13-yard catch by Craig, an incompletion to Wilson, and because of the bad turf, Joe Montana throws a pass to tight end fullback Earl Cooper. He catches the pass. Darrell Green strips it, and Rich Milot recovers the fumble.
Yep.
They have the ball on the Niners 35 with about 6 minutes left to go in the third quarter. Monk has a 12-yard catch. Riggins runs for 2, and there is a huge pass interference penalty on Ronnie Lott against Art Monk. And this will come back into play later in this game, which places the ball at the 6-yard line. Riggins gets some 5. Basically, that's their strategy inside the 10 is just give it to 44. Riggins runs for 5, and then he goes in from 1 yard out.
So now we're at 14-0. Now
I do want to add, there's 3:45 left to go in the third quarter. There is not a lot of time for San Francisco.
I was just going to say now, because at 7-0, you're like, anything could happen. Now 14-0 with the way San Francisco's offense is going, with the way the refs are calling it.
Yes.
It is very much like that looks like a bigger lead than it is.
And if you're San Francisco, it's like you don't want to press, but you're like, we really need to make something happen here.
Yep.
They have great field position because a face mask on the kickoff puts them close to midfield. There is a screen for a loss of 1, and then with 2:51 left in the third quarter, they get to the Washington 45, and Green has a huge pass breakup. And you can't send Wersching out, so you send Oros, and it's a touchback. To their credit, Washington, you would have thought, would have put the nail in the coffin on this next play because Riggins gets some 10 on the first play of this drive after starting in the 20.
Make it to where they're on the 30.
Yes.
Yep.
And what does Joe Theismann proceed to do with 2 healthy legs?
He just bombs a pass to Brown for 70 yards.
We're talking downtown Charlie Brown.
I was just going to say, the time of this, the way that San Francisco just lost the ball, and then it's literally 2 plays, and then they're 70 yards down for a touchdown. Now it's 21-0. I can't imagine that the feeling in San Francisco was like, okay, we can come back. You know that just like you could see it on players' faces where they're just like, we're done.
Bill Walsh is just going to be either spraying the kid in the face with a hose or yelling at him during a 3-legged race, Chris. You can imagine what it'd be like if they came back, though, right? Right? Everybody on offense, good, great, grand, wonderful. No yelling at RFK Stadium.
The mucus queen is yours.
Thanks. Those came with a tent. So just over a minute left in the third quarter, you're thinking, but to me, the mark of a champion is what they do. I think this is more impressive than what the Bills did, only because of the window.
Oh.
Only because of granted, the Bills had it more, but they're playing a defense that thrives on turnovers and an offense that should, for all intents and purposes, scored 30 more points.
Yep.
So I put it on that same level, what we're about to see take place now. Nehemiah gets some 12 on second down when they start their next drive. Then Francis gets him another 13, and we start the fourth quarter. And they're about to score. There's a couple of really big plays on this drive. Nehemiah had 2 huge catches on this drive, one to get him past the 50, and then 2 of them to get him past the 50, and then Francis to get him really inside the fucking scoring position. So it's 1st and goal at the 3. Montana loses 2 on first down, and then Wilson has a 5-yard touchdown catch. Mm-hmm. It's 21-7 with 14:37 left in the game. And you're thinking, okay, it's not really a game anymore, but they made this respectable.
I was just going to say, it's not a shutout.
No.
It's not and you kind of see, like I was saying, like if you look at the body language of San Francisco, they kind of were like, okay, good, we scored. Not like, we're back in this game.
Oh,
you know?
Yeah, 100%. So they start at their own 13. They end up picking up a first down with a Theismann scramble and then Riggins running for 6. And San Francisco's defense comes up huge. On third down, on the after they get the first down, Board has a great sack strip of Theismann to kill the drive. Mm-hmm. Grimm recovers it. Russ Grimm, future Hall of Famer Russ Grimm for Washington, and they're forced to punt. Dana McLemore catches the punt, and he's stripped. And the Redskins get it back.
Which is crazy. That's when you really think the game is over.
Honestly, yeah. You would have thought, okay, if San Francisco can get something cooking here, we got a game. But, like, while watching it, I thought, there's no way they can come back.
Yeah.
There's no way. There's not enough time. Washington starts mounting a drive from the Niners' 35 with 11:32 to go. Riggins goes for 2. Riggins gets another 4. And in 4th and 1 with 10:04 in the fourth quarter, I'm thinking Gibbs wants this one back because you do have Riggins. I would have gone for it.
Yeah.
Because even if you don't get it,
you're not giving him good field position. It's nowadays, I feel like it's more popular to go for this. I feel like back then you would get like...
Oh, you get crucified in the media.
Yes.
They'd be like, why would you run it? I don't know. This guy who's my running back just set the NFL record for rushing touchdowns and excels in these situations.
Exactly.
So it's 4th and 1 with 10:04 left in the fourth quarter, and they bring out Mark Moseley one more time.
It's so brutal.
From 41 yards, what happens, Chris?
You know what happens.
I know what happens.
He nails it right down the middle.
His wife catches it in the stands. They have a baby football named Stitch Face.
4 consecutive misses. Just to put it in perspective, that's 12 points from a guy where you're like, oh, he'll make 3 of 4.
He was the previous season's MVP.
4 misses.
And that's kind of what I was wondering about that decision making with 4th and 1
because he missed 3 times already.
Not only did he miss 3 times, if Riggins picks up the first down, say that, even if you don't score on this drive, you will bleed another maybe 3 to 5 plus minutes off the clock.
Yes.
So he ends up missing, and the Niners get the ball back, and you're thinking, maybe. And what do? The first play after the missed field goal?
A 76-yard pass to Solomon from Montana, obviously, to literally change what everybody is thinking about this game. Because the way San Francisco has been playing, you're like, yeah, they might drive down, but I doubt they're literally first play out of the blocks, and you're like, oh, I guess we have a game now.
So when my dad went to Notre Dame, Montana was there.
Yeah.
And even then, he would tell me he was at these games where he would just pull stuff out of his ass in the fourth quarter. Like, he wouldn't look good maybe for the first half, first three quarters, but then something would just click and it'd just be magic.
Yep.
Just be ridiculous. So we're at like you said, 9:48 left to go in the fourth quarter. It's 21-14, and if I'm Washington, I'm scared shitless.
Yeah.
Because over the course of the last quarter and a half, the Niners' offense is starting to make things happen. So they start at their own 23, and then Board has another huge sack to force a 3-and-out. There was a controversial play where PI might have been called on an pass to Art Monk, but it wasn't, and they're forced to punt. The Niners start on their own 47 with 8:34 left to go in the fourth quarter, and the tight end has a huge catch down to the Washington 38. Tyler runs for 4. Wilson gets him down to the 12. And then Wilson has a touchdown catch to tie the game.
Yep. So going into the fourth, you're like, game's over. Right now, there's 5 minutes left, I think.
There's just over 7 minutes left.
And you're at 21-21. And also, on top of this, you can't be, as a Redskins fan, being like, okay, we can kick one. You know what I mean?
Yep.
That's how bad it is for your momentum, where it's like, well, our kicker can't make one. We've seen that. And our offense is really kind of stopped dead in this fourth quarter.
Yeah, and now you don't have the advantage of a lead where you can kill the clock with Riggins.
Exactly.
But to their credit, they stick with him, and they start to mount a very interesting, controversial drive.
There you go. That's what I wanted to hear. But
So-
I just want to say this, because if you watch this game, really the best player was always Riggins, and they kept going to him when they were scoring. When they don't score, they go away from him.
Yeah.
And you're all right, well, maybe we should just stick with him.
This is a great strategy to not give the ball to our best player on this day.
Exactly.
So there's a big return by Alvin Garrett to the 45. Unfortunately, they still have to start on their own 14 because of a clip that's called. With 6:52 left in the fourth quarter, Riggins has a 17-yard run to really get them out of their own, zone, out of their own territory. Then he runs for 5. Didier picks up a first down for 6. Monk has a 13-yard catch, and then on the next play, there's a ticky-tack PI on Eric Wright against Monk.
I watched this play and the next.
Yes.
But I watched a couple of angles on this, and I remember thinking, because somebody put in the comments, they're like, his hand's on him right there. And you're like, if that's pass interference in the 80s, then I'm Joe Montana. I don't even know what to tell you. It is such a non-call call where you feel like, and this just happens in sports, where you're like, the refs are like, we're going to kind of take over this game.
Was Joe Theismann dating Donna Summer at the time?
God, I hope so.
Oh man, that'd be an interesting couple. But no, and the shitty part is pass interference. If you don't know, that is a spot foul penalty.
Yep.
So Theismann's throwing it down the field. It gets them to the San Francisco 18 with just over 2 minutes to go, because of, if you're completing passes and you're running Riggins, the time is just melting away on the clock. So 2:14 left in the fourth quarter. Riggins runs for 4, then he runs for 2, and we get to the 2-minute warning.
And here,
go ahead.
I was going to say the pass interference, I think, is a horrible call. This next call of holding might be one of the worst calls ever. It's 2 guys not involved in the play. One of them's not even, when they just kind of stop.
Theismann isn't even looking at him.
Not even looking at him. It's crazy.
Like, it's utterly ridiculous. And if they were calling these in the 80s, when you could still kind of assault people.
Yes.
I mean, the Mel Blount rule exists, but like, it's not being heavily enforced.
They just made clotheslines and chair shots illegal. So it's like, that's what I'm trying to say. It is 2 of the weakest calls in a time in NFL where it was way, way more rough than it is now.
The cream is rising to the top for the Washington Redskins from the official. Oh, yeah. That might be the last one I got in me after this weekend. But it's a 2-minute warning. It's an incomplete pass to Elvin Garrett, and there is, like you said, the horrendous defensive holding call on Ronnie Lott.
Yes.
And you could tell the body language of the 49ers players was just like, where the hell did that come from?
Yes. Because I feel like you could watch it when the ref throws a flag. So it's Ronnie Lott, and I forget who it was on the Redskins. Mm-hmm. They're looking around like what was called. Not do you know what I mean?
They did,
yes.
Because if a wide receiver is held, he's gesturing and gesticulating towards the officials. They were just like, where'd that flag come from?
Literally. And you're just like, oh, okay, I guess they really want the Redskins to win this game.
And if that was not called, they would have had to send Moseley in from about 30.
Yes.
The PI gets them down to the 8. And at this point, Washington, all they're trying to do is bleed clock and get it to where Moseley wants to kick it. So Riggins runs for no gain, then he runs for 1, and with 1:07 left in the fourth quarter, he loses a yard. 40 seconds remain in this game for a 25-yard field goal from Mark Moseley. 4 in a row he's missed. This is an absolute gift on a silver platter. This is an extra point that he is set to kick. He hasn't missed an extra point today.
No, but it is a chip shot, and luckily for the Redskins, it actually goes through. But there is still a little bit of time left after this.
There is a little bit of time left, and you're thinking maybe there's some Montana magic left or some Montana magic
there you
left
go.
in there. So the Niners start at their own 20. Montana has a 15-yard scramble. Then an incompletion leaves him with 14 seconds left, and you got to go for a heave.
Yep, and it's an interception.
Picked off by Vernon Dean, and that ended one of the wackiest fourth quarters I have ever witnessed as a football fan.
Well, I've heard this from 49er fans where they're like, we didn't feel like we were beaten by the Redskins. We felt like we were beaten by the refs on that game, especially with that fourth quarter where they had all of the momentum. Redskins kicker couldn't make one outside of 20 yards. You know what I mean? It was such a bad back-to-back calls, essentially, that you're just like, well, I mean, yeah, you won, but did you deserve it?
I think they feel like not only the refs screwed them, they screwed themselves in the first half.
Oh, yeah.
Like, where I bet you a lot of the offensive players put it on themselves after the game. Like, it should never have come down to this.
Yes.
Maybe a field goal in the first half would have helped us. Like
anything. Because, you're right.
Maybe points in the first 3 quarters of play would have helped us. So a little postscript to this game here, because the Redskins win and they end up playing in Super Bowl 18 against the Raiders. Mm-hmm. And they are heavy favorites. People were calling this the greatest team of all time, and then Howie Long and his awesome crew cut and Marcus Allen went to work on them.
Yep.
They got blasted 38-9.
Which is wild. But if you watch the San Francisco game, their offense wasn't clicking, and they kind of went into that Super Bowl not clicking.
In that, after that game, though, and this is a credit to Joe Gibbs, over the preceding 8 years, they won another 2 Super Bowls. Mm-hmm. And they won them with 2 different quarterbacks because Theismann's leg explodes in 85, and you get Doug Williams and Jay Schrader, and Doug Williams won the Super Bowl in 87. And then in 91, you have Mark Rippon, and that is considered one of the best NFL teams of all time. Also 14-2 team. The Niners took this game really to heart.
Yes, because then the next year they come back.
I watched that America's game, that 1984 one on the Niners, and every player on there was talking about how angry they were and how, like, 84 was the revenge tour.
Yep.
So in 84, they go 15-1 and annihilate everyone and win the Super Bowl, not on a Ray Finkel missed kick, but because they beat the hell out of Dan Marino.
Yes.
And Roger Craig played an incredible game. And then they became the team of the 80s, not the Redskins. Despite Washington winning a couple extra Super Bowls. Mm-hmm. They won in 88 and 89, and they were the new... Everyone was kind of considering Washington to be the 80s dynasty heading into this game.
It's also different when you win those last 2 years, because it's most recent on your mind, and you're like, well, that was the team in the 80s, and you're like, no, I mean, the Redskins won 3.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like,
their last one was in 91, but yeah.
oh, yeah. Okay.
But still, it's like, still crazy. And like, nobody talks about this game. I don't think anyone outside of these kind of fan bases who witnessed it or watched it really talk about it. And it's like, as mistake-laden and controversial as the ending was, that fourth quarter is bar none one of like the most thrill-seeking things I've seen in a playoff game. So if you have a chance, please watch this game. It's absolutely fantastic.
And the first half is a kind of comic. Actually, the whole game is a little comical just with the kicking.
Yes.
Where you're just like, these guys are professional kickers. That's when I was like, I'm going to be an NFL kicker.
You're playing the Benny Hill theme in the background when Mark Moseley goes out. But a 24-21 win by Washington. And thanks for listening, everybody.